in a few
yes,
years.
it's certainly put a rocket under all of us. So.
You're listening to the Cosmic Cast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cosmic Cast. Today you're here with me, the turtle at the bottom of all the turtles, Rick Bieber here. To my left, in a parallel universe, his name is Grognak the Destroyer, Tom Harvey.
Hello.
If this is all a simulation, he's winning, Dr. John Pernett Fisher.
Hi there.
And today we have a guest for you all. In a past life, she was a PhD researcher at the University of Manchester, and now she has been reincarnated as a worker and researcher at the European Space Agency, Dr. Fran McDonald.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for
It's our
coming.
pleasure, yeah, absolutely.
I'm still getting used to the doctor title, actually. It's still a bit fresh, so...
Have you been through and changed all your bank details and all that kind of thing?
No.
Well, you insisted at before we started that I said doctor before I introduced you.
No.
Kept on going, you better say doctor or I'm leaving. So yeah, Fran, you did actually start out here. You did a PhD here at Manchester University.
I did. It wasn't any PhD. I actually was here for 9 years in
Oh, well,
Manchester. I did my undergrad and then my PhD as well. So,
Yeah.
good times at Manchester.
So did you always know the trajectory was going to be, I want to go into academia?
No, far from it. I had a bit of a much longer route than the average person. I didn't even actually start at Manchester till I was 27. So I was stood out as one of the slightly older ones in the group, but fortunately I'm very short, so I could hide it a little bit as well. But certainly the big space element, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, it's very interesting, but it'd never been my main goal. It was very much core geology. That's what I originally did. So I went on the geology route, but then anybody in the lunar industry will surely know Dr. Katie Joy, and she became a supervisory role in my life, and then very much the moon overtook. The enthusiasm from Katie and just the moon in itself put me on this trajectory for more planetary and space involvement, and this is eventually I've got towards this ESA role.
So you did your PhD and that was studying lunar, was it meteorites, studying lunar surface?
No, it was even more interesting than that. I kind of applied for two PhDs. One that was terrestrial based, looking at Earth rocks, and one that was moon based, looking at the lunar rocks. But a similar technique of using noble gas mass spectrometry analysis to really sort of probe into the internal workings and compare the sort of mantle signatures to figure out the origin and evolution of these planetary bodies. I was kindly offered, you can do either one you want.
Oh, wow. Okay.
At which point it was like, I'm not very good at making decisions, so let's have a mashup. So then it became this really interesting comparative study, and I did a bit of both.
No, it's a very cool project. I think that, having that sort of terrestrial element is really important, really. It gives you a good firm footing for some of the lunar stuff.
Absolutely, and they've got such an intrinsic history together, the Earth and Moon, and it's really studying the two together complements each other, and it's a good way of doing it rather than getting isolated in one body. So it brings it back to the inner solar system as a whole.
Well, particularly some of the Earth rocks you were studying are quite cool, aren't they? So you were studying komatiites.
Yeah.
And so for people who don't know what a komatiite is.
It's probably some of the oldest rocks you'll find on the Earth. So the ones I were looking at were about 3.3 billion years old, some of them. So they're meant to be sort of extruded from the very sort of early regions of the mantle, so hoping to get as close to some of these early signatures of the early forming mantle, because the Earth is a very active body and there's a lot of processes that can overprint some of the oldest rocks you'll find, so whether it be weathering or oceans or fresh eruptions. So it's difficult to find these. So I actually had to go and ask some other scientists very nicely who have had big expensive drilling programs if they'd let me have access to these rocks. But so they hold a lot of secrets, but also they're very beautiful. If you see them in the thin section, you get this really kaleidoscopic rainbow image of these very olivine-rich samples, and they're very good for publications. I normally make the front cover as well. They just look very pretty. So it was good to study the komatiites and then to compare them to the moon rocks as well.
And I guess they're both of the same age, basically, aren't they? They're all...
And the moon will pip them when it comes to being ancient. So I was pushing sort of towards the 3.9 billion year age with some of these moon rocks. But again, it really emphasises why to study the two, because you get this very ancient surface that the moon's preserved, and it almost records this like moment in time that we don't find on the Earth still, so it can reflect what's happened to the Earth as well as the Moon. So.
You didn't just do your research here at Manchester, though. You also did a little stint at NASA, if I'm correct, or the LPI.
Yes, so I was very lucky to have lots of opportunities, and also a supportive supervisor that said, you go and grab the opportunities and go and do them. So before I know the event you're talking about, prior to that, I actually went and camped out in the Arizona desert just outside Flagstaff for a couple of weeks, along with another colleague, Nat, who I believe you've also had in on your session. So we were holed up in a tent, just camping by Meteor Crater. So we did this geology field trip with Dr. Kring from the LPI Institute. And he's now the curator of Meteor Crater, which is also known as Barringer Crater. So the Barringer family have given him curation rights. And he actually takes and trains astronauts on the geology aspects by taking them into Meteor Crater, because it's an analog site for the sort of craters you find on the Moon as well. So we got to go through this geology experience that the astronauts get taught.
So you were right down there in the crater centre. So
absolutely, it was really fun.
The general public don't get to do that, do they?
No, they don't.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But so you get a really different perspective, because it's very easy to sort of look down and think, oh, it's not that big. But once you actually get down there and you're inside and you look up, it really explains. Because people often say, why can't you land here on the Moon? An astronaut can just trot down into the crater. And once you're there, it becomes very apparent why that's not a possibility.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you see these pictures, don't you, of it from I guess some considerable distance, and you sort of lose that sense of scale, I suppose.
I mean, particularly on the Moon, is you haven't got a tree or a house there just to give you that scale, and it's these obscene scales. But just on a slightly more social, if I don't lower the tone too much, there's no facilities in the bottom of the crater, and it was a long day there, and we were approaching this little rocky boulder, and we were told, this is the time that you may go and relieve yourselves. So we all went to go around the other side of the boulder, at which point we were informed, please take note that the observation station on the rim is the side that you've just gone from the boulder, right in front of the telescope. So we had to really quickly rethink our use of the local amenities there.
I mean, it's good they told you before rather than after.
Makes me think someone's made the error in the past.
So presumably you're not allowed to remove any material from the crater. Presumably
You're allowed to place some down there.
Add a new stratigraphic layer. No. Yes, it's poor form to start just taking your own souvenirs.
Yeah.
What is sad is there is a lot of security around the site, and you can find little areas where people have gone rustling trying to steal, because they're looking for the remnants of the impact that made it. So they're looking for this Canyon Diablo meteorite or these tectites that are around. So it's a shame that is something that does occur.
No, because it's a very important meteorite. So the Canyon Diablo meteorite, for people that aren't aware, is an iron meteorite, and it's particularly interesting in the world of geochemistry because it's used as a lead isotope standard. It's thought to preserve the initial composition of lead isotopes that all terrestrial samples evolved from, basically. Wow. So it's quite an important end member in terms of their systematics, and so to have a little fragment on your desk of that would be quite a neat thing. Actually, I think you can buy them off eBay quite easily, actually.
I do have several bits of it that keep getting to me somehow. There's a Professor Carlton Moore came to do a bit of a talk about it. He's the authority on Canyon Diablo, and he gave us all a little piece, but every time I know anyone who's been in a sniffing distance of Flagstaff, you get a bit of Canyon Diablo meteorite. You are right there everywhere.
You've actually worked with Dr. Kring after that as well, though, right?
Yes, very kindly, he agreed to let me come and work with him again, and it was for a 10-week summer internship that he runs in America, in Houston, at the Lunar and Planetary Institute. And you get to go and visit the Johnson Space Center just around the corner and work closely and get to see the samples there. Again, he gets a big international team together, which is really nice because it's quite hard to do anything that's related sort of to NASA without being an American citizen. So it's quite nice that he does fight for these opportunities to have international representation. But that was really exciting, getting to live there. You get to meet the top scientists there. They're really lovely. And we worked as a team on a project actually planning a lunar mission to the far side of the Moon in Schrödinger Crater, which is in the sort of edge of the South Pole Aitken Basin region, which is very high priority for a lot of scientists to go to, as one of the largest and oldest basins on the Moon. It's sort of perhaps got the secrets of some of this maybe lower crustal and possibly even mantle material that might have been excavated during a massive impact event. So we were trying to plan out a robotic traverse and how they could make some really meaningful scientific measurements, not like in situ, so you get the real context of the geology where the rover's been, but to also be returning samples to then get detailed follow-up laboratory analysis to really tackle some of those outstanding science questions, certainly to do with the aging and the formation and thermal evolution of the moon, and in turn how that adds to our understanding of how Earth formed as well.
Would you say Schrödinger Crater is one of the best mapped and studied craters out there? Because it seems that every year David Kring's interns always seem to study that particular crater.
Well, yes, it's absolutely been done. And I think this is great to have this passing on the
absolutely.
knowledge,
Yeah,
the
it's not a bad thing.
continuity to keep doing it. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to be the absolute target point for this new kind of boots on the ground mission that has been announced. So it's a shame, but it's by no means has the work gone to waste. It's still very much told us a lot about the region. I'm sure something will be planned for that. It's just had such a diverse amount of geology as well, so that's why it was such a good area. So yes, it's been mapped with an inch of its life at the moment, but it's been brilliant to actually have this continuity and not just these isolated projects that don't really get picked up or looked at again.
We were involved in a paper as well off the back of that internship.
Yes, it was a Steenstra et al. Paper, and it really said what we did, because the other exciting bit about it was it wasn't just us as planetary scientists, it wasn't us just gushing over the rocks. We actually paired up with some Boeing interns as well, so we're starting to learn how to interface and talk cross disciplines with these interns. So it's really looking at it within a mission architecture, and also with the vision of a sort of gateway, which is all the buzzword of the moment now. So this is sort of having this geostationary habitat that is about 65,000 kilometers in the Lagrange 2 position above the far side of the moon. That creates this kind of not only communication relay, but could assist telerobotic control, particularly for the far side of the moon, and could even be a place for sort of transporting samples to and from the surface. So this is all stuff that's ongoing. It starts sounding a little bit sort of sci-fi, but I mean, I think you have to think that way to then reach forwards.
I mean, that is the current plan, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah.
Which is quite exciting. I guess this sort of segues then quite nicely into what you do at the European Space Agency. So how long have you been there now?
Not long. I only started in January this year. So I moved from actually sunny Manchester today, and then to Netherlands. So I'm living in a place called Leiden, just south of Amsterdam. And then I go across to a place called Noordwijk, which is on the west side, on the coast. So just tucked in behind the sand dunes is this little isolated village of about 3,000 engineers, and it's the ESA ESTEC site. So this is the Science Research and Technology Centre for ESA. It's the biggest site, and it's brilliant. It's a really international environment. You do have a science directorate there as well. I'm not actually based in that directorate. I'm in the human and robotic exploration team, and I'm in the strategy and innovation team. So really, and I'm a big advocate for the moon science, really making sure that science is a core part of the missions. And then, so again, I'm having to learn more and more to do this, speaking to the engineers.
So what sort of things do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So as the research fellow, it's 50% research and 50% project work, although the project work has been more therefore, because it's such an exciting time. I mean, it's getting ridiculous, the interest in the moon. It's incredible. I love it. It's a brilliant time to be back in the moon, but it's just keeping you on your toes. It's going, it's changing.
I'll bet.
So we've got strong new strategies we've been working on. So one that is really just purely for science at the moon, and another one that's for space resources. So these have gone to program boards and in the process of being passed. And then when we have our ministerial at the year, that will lock in the funding for the next 3 years. It looks like we've got a really strong following for this. And this is all based on sort of inputs that we've had from our member states. We're an agency, the truest sense. We're representing our member states. So we really want to push through and make sure that this science is core. But there's lots of other projects that I get involved in.
So this ministerial meeting, I guess, is quite interesting. I guess listeners might not be too familiar, I suppose, with how the structure of the European Space Agency works.
It's a good question, and I'm not sure I've got it all down yet. It's a very big, complex international effort. So I'm trying to figure it out myself. So we work with a certain area, and we have our own specific program board that we go through, which is for sort of science and engineering and exploration. So there's many levels that go through, and the member states have their inputs as well, and then it all goes through to the end, to this big ministerial at the end of the year.
And that's where all the various government ministers get together and sort of set policy, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably refer you to the website to find out more about this. It's very much... I'm at the lower scale of this. But this is the thing that you do very much feel like you do input, and everything you do does count towards this.
Sounds very exciting. So is there a real buzz at the moment then amongst the sort of the lunar advocates in ESA at the moment as a result of this recent statement from America that they're definitely going back in a few years?
It's certainly put a rocket under all of us. So, I mean, the beauty of space and agencies and space industry is the truly kind of the global international working together part of it. It's very rare you have these true international sort of peaceful cooperative projects. Of course, there's always going to be a lot of politics involved, but to first order big projects like International Space Station, the obvious one, again, multiple nations working together. But there is then we've sort of had these agreed kind of global exploration network roadwork maps that we all sort of work towards, with an idea of how do we progress slowly and build on the exploration towards maybe Mars in the future, and using the moon as a platform on the way to get there. But now that the timeline has certainly jumped somewhat with this big announcement, so it's just there's a little bit of a reassessment of just making sure that things do programmatically fit. So certainly the ESA-led Heracles mission architecture, which is what I was working within the framework of when I did my internship with the Lunar and Planetary Institute. That's having a little reassessment at the moment. So it's sort of getting the people involved. So it's ESA, JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, CSA, the Canadian one, and then the interest from NASA. It's just getting us talking again there's sort of a few panels. So I have some visibility of the science and benefit panel, and there's the other ones for scale up and programmatic panels, just reassessing how can we optimize this mission, which was originally sort of a precursor to human return. If maybe the timelines are going to shift, we want to make sure we're optimizing it in a way that it still programmatically fits moving forward. So it's constantly reassessing and making sure that everything sort of goes in the right direction, that everyone is happy. So, but yes, it's sort of sped up some of those conversations, maybe. Yeah.
How are you finding living in the Netherlands? Sorry.
It's very flat.
Yes, I'll bet. And you're a keen caver too, aren't you? So that's got to hamper those...
Yeah, there's a bit of a kibosh on that side of things, because if there's one region of the world that has no limestone and is underwater, then it's Netherlands, because I don't know if people know what the windmills are for. This was the fact that keeps getting battered around, that it's not for grinding your flour, but it is for reclaiming the land from the sea. Largely, most of the country is actually below sea level.
Yeah.
So, that's not it's not the best place for a caver, but it is beautiful. Also, being a short person, it's not very friendly for that. It's not a myth. People are pretty tall there. Just don't shop from the top shelf in the supermarket. But no, people are lovely, very good at English. I am taking Dutch lessons, but it's very hard to practice when everyone can just speak better English than you can. So. But I really like it. I really like the pace of life and the people there, and it's very pretty where I am as well. And but again, I spend a lot of my time in this kind of little international village as well, which is lovely. And there's a lot of people that travelled from other countries, not necessarily knowing anyone, and academia is brilliant, but there may be occasionally be this, can we give our results out yet, and this, that, and the other. But here, you're very much working together, and you're very willing to be sharing up ideas
that's
and
fantastic.
seeing where collaborations are. I feel very welcome and very free to go and knock on someone's door and have a chat to them.
Just as it should be, really.
So I'm really enjoying that aspect of it.
So you said that part of your involvement with ESA was research. What does that entail?
So, I mean, as a research fellow, part of your interview is you write your own research proposal. So being a true sort of petrologist, really looking at the properties and the characteristics of rocks, I very much got a large part of that into my proposal. But as things have developed and as opportunities have arisen, it's very clear now what my research is actually going to be. And it's this incredibly exciting new ANXA program that's arisen now, and ANXA stands for the Apollo Next Generation Sample Analysis Program. And there are these specially curated Apollo core samples from several missions that have the the scientists and the organisers at that time had the foresight to think maybe if we keep some of these samples specially curated and open somewhere in the future once technology is advanced, that would be a good thing to do, to keep really learning what we can from this precious collection of samples. And there's a big American scientist called Chip Shearer, who's been a really big advocate for this for many, many years, and he's really pushed for this, and it's finally happened. The day has happened, and it's really exciting. I'm so pleased to be involved with this, and I'm part of representing ESA. I'm going to be involved in a consortium that's focusing on Apollo 17 core sample, and this is a drive tube core sample. It's remained vacuum sealed, and it's only had some X-ray CT imaging done through its canister, but it was sort of double vacuum sealed once it was returned, and now's the day to start analysing it with this. So there's going to be 9 different American institutes that are going to be doing this whole scientific campaign, really challenging some of these questions, particularly looking at maybe if there was some volatile information there, because the depth that this course, the drill core got to, it might have actually sampled some frozen material at the time. So although it hasn't been curated frozen, it could have still managed to trap some of these volatiles. But the role ESA's actually going to play is more sort of logging the whole event, really understanding the life cycle of this sample from its selection and extraction at the lunar surface through to now being open and analysed in a lab. See, really understanding anything and everything that could have affected the properties of this sample, and building lessons learned, seeing how we can support optimising the results that the science team get. What are their requirements? What do they need to know that's happened to this sample? And then I'll go back to the engineers and say, come on, what can we do to make this better in the future? Can we, because the likelihood is the volatiles have seeped. The seal won't have been 100% effective, but it's finding out how effective has it been. You know, this is the biggest challenge. So before we get anywhere near opening these samples, there's 1,001 things that we have to really, really think about and assess. And then I'll ask the engineers saying, you know, this big thing is this volatiles is going to be prospecting for volatiles in the near future. So with that in mind, what can we do to perhaps make a really well-defined sample canister for future missions? So it's an interesting role, and it gets to mean I'll be interacting with most members of the team, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's very cool. It's interdisciplinary as well.
Yes, yeah. Again, talking to these engineers, the language I'm learning, as well as Dutch, I'm learning engineer. So.
And you're actually off to Houston next week as part of this.
I am, and it's returning to the Lunar and Planetary Institute, so they're kindly hosting this meeting. I think at the moment there's going to be 40 people attending. You've got all the big bods like Ryan Ziegler as the Apollo curator from NASA, and then it's Chip Shearer leading the way. So there's the 9 different institutes. The scientists will be presenting what science they're going to be conducting, and then it's really a big time to get together and start putting together a plan. It's going to be really fun and learning lots about the life cycle of these incredible Apollo samples.
How will you go about analysing, or people will go about analysing the volatiles if they become unfrozen and they're just being released into tube?
Exactly. This is why it's such a interesting project, and by no means are we just going to go there and crack these samples open tomorrow. So part of the curation was that they were then put into another vacuum sealed container once they returned. So if you've got any of these loosely bound volatiles, not because previously there has been volatiles measured that have been trapped within grains, actually within the crystal boundaries, but these loosely bound ones, where are they? What's happened to them? Because seals they're only going to be so efficient in over 50 years.
Well, they were just indium seals, weren't they, I think? Is that
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
So this is the whole thing, assessing how good these seals are, and whether there's contamination or how much gas. So, I mean, that's part of the discussion. So it's very much going to see if we can siphon off any of this head gas that might be in this second sealed container. I mean, you could find nothing. Does that mean there weren't any volatiles? Or does it mean it's leaked? So it's all trying to figure out how we piece together what the original integrity of the rock is. Yeah. I mean, it's wondering if you could even sort of isotopically tag an inert gas that you pump in under positive pressure to the system and see if you could detect that tagged, to see what kind of rate might be.
I mean, it seems technically very challenging.
Absolutely. So this is why they wanted a bit more of a engineering stance as well. So I'll be that bridge.
I was talking informally to Ryan actually a few days ago, and he was saying that apparently some of the pressures in the outside case are not actually that evacuated, and so it's a bit of a concern there as to what that means exactly, as to whether there is a leak or if it is just gas that's been released. So yeah, it's going to be really
Absolutely.
interesting.
And I mean, you know, this is 60s, 70s technology, so I mean, it's incredible as it is. So, but it's just, what can we learn from that? If it wasn't if there's something really good about it, then absolutely we'll move forward with that. If not, then that's a lesson learned. That's a key thing, and we'll know how to move forward. But to really be maximising the science that we can get from these samples, it's just trying to assess, okay, if there has been a leak, can we figure out some way of noting just how much and how that might affect someone's isotopic measurement? So.
I mean, it's amazing they were able to, while the astronauts were there sampling these things, managed to create a seal in the first place. I mean, some of this, I think we've mentioned in the past how all the Apollo fine-grained dust on the surface gets everywhere, and then to try and like brush that off and to create a perfect vacuum must have been really challenging.
And dexterity in those
that
outfits
too, yeah,
is just. I mean, I know the astronauts you talk to now when they go through training, they're all climbers. They do a lot of climbing to really sort of strengthen up that forearm, because you're sort of fighting against these pressurized suits. And not over that, you see these images of cords stuck between the indium seal from their suits and equipment that you can't see when you've got limited visibility. And there's also the graceful image of the astronaut bouncing and face planting across getting used to the environment. So it's just these alien conditions that you've got to. So again, this is the whole, what can we do moving forward? How can we sort of make it that some of these same errors don't happen again, and make it easier and simpler for the astronauts to actually be able to collect these samples as well. So it's all assessing the seal, not just the samples.
Because it's a big deal, really. These sort of tubes don't get opened very often, do they? It's like almost like a decadal, maybe even longer timescales that these things get open. So it's... And I guess a lot of that early expertise from the 70s, when they were properly processed, probably aren't really around anymore.
Well, I don't know. This is why, again, this is the good time to do it, because they've not all popped off yet.
No,
you've still got that knowledge there. And in fact, part of our consortium is Harrison Jack Schmidt, the astronaut who did pick up the sample himself. So we've got the A team there, so you can very much fill in the geological context. But I mean, it's just in itself the morphology there, because it's within this sort of light mantle landslide region. It's like, were there actually two events? Is it related to this scarp fault that it's collected against? So it's not just finding out the really old history, sort of billion-year history of the moon. It's really understanding some form of tectonics, because I know we think of this sort of dead moon there's a one plate body, but actually there is movement to do with its thermal evolution, sort of contraction, and this is what we have all these sort of Moonquakes data that's still in itself these sort of the Apollo lunar surface equipment packages, the experiment packages. They're still giving us this information now. We've got the time concept to look over, so it's really bringing together again the whole legacy of the Apollo, the missions, not just the samples. So, and definitely now, whilst we still have the knowledge, as well as the newfangled, very sensitive big machines that go ping that can measure these things as well. So
something that we like to ask everybody that comes and has a chat with us is if there's an area of science outside of your kind of prime area of research that you find particularly interesting.
I mean, I'm not going a million miles away here, but within the same building that I am at ESA, we have the robotics team. There's like a little mini Mars landscape mock-up and little robots that are moving around, and these crazy guys just at computers and with simulated arms on the go, and it's very cool. It just seems unbelievably cool. So I think I definitely want to be able to sort of have a bit more of the computer savvy to be becoming one with the artificial intelligence.
Do you think they battle them?
I don't know.
Like robot war.
Maybe at night. I don't know. So sticking within a similar area, I'd love to be a bit more involved in the robotics side of things. But otherwise, I think what I'd want to get a bit more. And again, it's not going a million miles away, but you have the CAVES program where the astronauts sort of do all their different types of training and preparation for their extravehicular activity, their EVAs, and part of this is doing caving, and that is my hobby, is my love, and I think I'd like to be able to sneak into that system at some point. So it's going to be a case of talking to the right people, I think, and seeing if I can get involved. Because again, there's lots of science that can be done in a cave as well, whether it's different, looking at climate records or chronology, which is all incredibly important at the moment for the, not wanting to sound too much of a hippie here, but the destruction that we are doing to our Earth at the moment. So I think, it's not going a million miles away from my interest, but it would be nice to have some focus on those areas as well.
Yeah, I can see why. Yeah. Well, Fran, can we just say thank you very much for coming on?
Thanks for having me.
An absolute pleasure. And hopefully we'll have you again in the future, but I'm sure you probably won't be back for a while now. But
I'll always be back. I'm already still writing something with John at the moment, so you never really let go of Manchester. Yeah, if we could do a gratuitous bit of an advert, we're writing an article for the A&G magazine, and it's a really fun one to write. It's 50 years on from Apollo 11. It's the legacy, not just of the samples, but all the benefits we've had from it and moving forward to future exploration. But
that should be out in August, hopefully, if we meet our deadlines.
Yes, but I mean, it's been incredible to write. You're just updating and cancelling week by week because the progress that's being made at the moment is insane. It's just, it's out of date by the time you've written it. So yes, I'll be back. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely, and thank you very much.